Mr. President.
Senator from Arizona.
I rise today to congratulate my colleagues on the recent introduction of legislation to renew Trade Promotion Authority. Increasing free trade levels the playing field for U.S. companies. We all know that. It increases competition. We know that too. It also increases access to foreign markets with all of the attendant benefits. U.S. businesses stand the best chance to see gains in accessing foreign markets through bilateral and regional free trade agreements. Now, given the complexity of these agreements, the consultation process and the expedited consideration provided by TPA is really the only way to go. According to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, the United States is, quote, the world's largest economy and the largest exporter and importer of goods and services. We export more than $2.2 trillion in goods and services, or we did so just last year. For those of us who represent border states, the issue hits very close to home. In recent years, Mexico has become America's third largest trading partner and our second largest export market. According to the Arizona-Mexico Commission, Arizona's ports of entry serve as gateways for $26 billion in U.S.-Mexican trade annually. And Arizona benefits from more than $13 billion in bilateral trade with Mexico every year. Now, given the benefits of vibrant export markets and access to low-cost imports, it's difficult to overstate the importance of getting trade agreements in place. A U.S. Chamber official recently noted in roll call that nearly half of U.S. exports go to our free trade agreement partners, and that these countries make up just 1/10 of the world economy. Let me repeat that. Half of our exports go to those countries with whom we have free trade agreements, yet those countries represent just 1/10 of the world's economy. That tells you the importance of getting these free trade agreements in place. In a recent opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal, former U.S. Trade Representative noted that, quote, on average in the past 5 years of a new free trade agreement, U.S. exports grew nearly 3 to 4 times as rapidly as U.S. exports to others. Now, this is great news, given that negotiations on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, are ongoing. Its successful approval would yield the largest regional free trade agreement the U.S. has ever been a part of. Now, approval of the TPP agreement would provide increased access to critical Asia-Pacific markets for U.S. businesses at a critical time. It's difficult to see how this agreement will be concluded without TPA. Given that a 2010 study prepared by the Business Roundtable found that 38 million jobs, 1 in 5 jobs in the United States, are supported by trade, the introduction of TPA renewal legislation couldn't be more timely. Again, I congratulate my colleagues for the introduction of this legislation. I look forward to its consideration. I yield back my time.
Mr. President.
Senator from Nebraska.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come to the floor today to acknowledge my colleagues in the Senate for standing up for family farms. I'm also here to issue a very straightforward warning to OSHA. The Senate makes crystal clear in the new appropriations bill that OSHA policies and inspectors better get in line with the law. Since 1976, Congress has included specific language in appropriation bills very specifically prohibiting OSHA from enforcement action on farms with 10 or fewer employees. However, Mr. President, this did not stop the agency from distorting the definitions of farming practices and sending inspectors to small, family-owned farming operations anyway. In my home state of Nebraska, OSHA targeted a family farm that grows corn, soybeans, and has just 1 non-family employee. It is clearly within the scope of the congressional exemption. Like most American farms, this farming operation includes grain bins for crop storage after harvest. But according to OSHA's absurd logic, grain storage, they say, is not part of farming operations, so it's not exempt from the regulations. Mr. President, I can't make this stuff up. While OSHA made no claim that anyone on the farm had been injured, the agency said the grain bins failed to comply with OSHA regulations, and get this, they slapped the farm with fines totaling $132,000. Now, this is not an issue that is confined to one farm in Nebraska. A 2011 memo from OSHA's enforcement chief to regional administrators acknowledged that the law prevents the agency from regulating small farms. They got that right. However, the memo proceeds to recategorize farming operations that happen after harvest, and OSHA said those are non-exempt. Under this recategorization, OSHA claimed its inspectors had the authority to regulate small, family-owned farms and their grain storage facilities. This is a blatant overreach and yet another example of this administration's backdoor rulemaking. Whenever I meet with farmers and ranchers in Nebraska, they oftentimes raise concern about federal regulatory overreach. It is absolutely no wonder that farmers and ranchers feel like they have a target on their backs. OSHA's twisting of the law serves as evidence that farmers' concerns are legitimate. Now, in response to OSHA's regulatory overreach, I wrote a letter to Secretary Perez, joined by a bipartisan group of 42 of my Senate colleagues. We requested that OSHA immediately stop their unlawful regulation of family farms. We also directed OSHA to issue updated guidance correcting their obvious misinterpretation of the law. I am pleased that the Omnibus Appropriations Bill further reinforces our position through report language specifically addressing OSHA's overreach while continuing the long-standing small farm exemption. The report language calls on OSHA to work with USDA before moving forward with any attempts to redefine and regulate post-harvest activities like storage grain. It also makes it clear that the exemption applies to these activities that occur on the farm. That includes the entire farming operation. So I would like to thank my 42 colleagues who joined me in signing the letter, as well as my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee for sending a clear message that federal agencies are not above the law. As I stated earlier, small family-owned farms have been exempt from OSHA regulations for the past 35 years. This is not a new concept. Simply put, this language reaffirms the common sense ideas that federal agencies cannot, should not bypass the law by redefining it to expand their jurisdiction. Let me be clear that we all want farms and ranches to be safe. In fact, a safe working environment is especially important for small farmers and ranchers whose families are oftentimes the only ones who work the farm or the ranch. Small family farms and ranches in my home state and across this country should be able to continue their work to feed and fuel the world without fear of being targeted by this administration in direct violation of the law. If the administration believes that the law should be changed, well, they should come to Congress, make their case. They should not ignore the law as if it does not exist. Again, I thank my colleagues for affirming the law of the land in supporting our nation's farmers and ranchers. Mr. President, I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. General speeches in the Senate this morning as they continue working behind the scenes on a Senate bill extending emergency unemployment benefits that expired in December. A round of votes is set for this afternoon at 2:30 Eastern, including one on a Democratic amendment that will extend the benefits through November. While we wait for further debate, a conversation with West Virginia Congressman Nick Rahall. ANC answered questions on this morning's Washington Journal concerning a recent chemical spill in his state that has threatened water supplies.
And West Virginia Democrat Nick Rahall joins us now at the desk. And Congressman, I want to start with that chemical spill that's impacted hundreds of thousands of people around Charleston and now downriver from there. Today's headlines from the Charleston Gazette: the first zones okayed to flush, according to the Gazettes, of people turning on their water again. What's the latest on the effort to address the chemical spill in the river there?
Well, before I address the latest, John, let me begin by commending our state and the tremendous response under the leadership of Governor Earl Ray Tomlin and our Homeland Security Director, Jimmy Jeanette. The state got the information together immediately after this spill was first confirmed, and got that information to the feds. And FEMA, I commend as well, on the federal end, responded immediately with a disaster declaration, and FEMA officials were in the state within 12 hours after that federal declaration, after midnight last Thursday, I believe it was. The governor has set up an interagency task force. They're doing their job in a very effective, methodological way to make sure that this water is safe. The latest, and of course all of our concern at the very top here, is for the health and safety of our people. That's paramount. And the first concern. The latest is that there is a slow return of water to these 300,000 some residents that have been affected. It's in a three-phased process, phase 1, 2, and 3. Residents can go to the website and learn what phase they're in and get a pretty good idea of when their water will return to normal. The first phase that's being returned to normal now, of course, affects the hospitals and schools and nursing homes and those vital institutions within the city of Charleston itself, as I understand it. And then from there, the water company announced, and it is public information, how they will spread out in the hopes of returning the water as quickly as possible to all the residents. We can't, of course, do it all at once. The system would not be able to handle that. So doing it in a phased-in manner is the most effective way, and to ensure the health and safety of the people. That water safety map that you talked about, also available on the Charleston Gazette's webpage. Here it is. Here, the red zones are still the do not use water areas around Charleston, the blue zone in the middle where water is safe. I want to talk about the inspections of this plant where the leak came from. Today's New York Times has a headline: calls for oversight in West Virginia went unheeded. Are you satisfied that the inspections were up to date on this plant, and what is going to happen going forward so this doesn't happen again? I can't say at this point whether I'm satisfied or not satisfied. I don't know the facts surrounding the inspections. I do know that I've met with Chemical Safety Board representatives in the state, 3 of them yesterday in Charleston. They've been there before. These are individuals that inspected the the Bayer aspirin factory disaster that we had a couple years ago. So they're familiar with our state process. They've done their initial interviews right now, and of course they'll get down to more serious interviews in the weeks, months ahead. But there are questions of properly reporting this spill by the company. There are questions who first discovered the spill. There are reports saying that citizens, by smelling the licorice-type odor in the air, were the first to discover this leak. That's not the way it should be. It should be the proper authorities doing proper inspections. The question, of course, is, were they required to do those inspections? But requirements are not. It should be incumbent upon, whether it's local, state, or federal officials, to constantly monitor discharges into the water. The state has now taken an inventory of all these tanks and facilities that are close to rivers, such as this tank was, very close to the river, and whether that should be allowed to continue in the future. So there are a lot of unanswered questions. from this situation, and we need those addressed. The Chemical Safety Board, the experts are in to help us address those questions.
So too soon to say at this point whether new legislation is going to be needed here, or whether you'll be proposing any?
Exactly, way too soon. And again, I go back to what I said in the beginning. Our first concern and most immediate concern is the health and safety of the people, number one.
We're talking with Congressman Nick Rahall, a Democrat of West Virginia. He's here to answer your questions and take your comments. Our phone lines are open. Democrats, it's 202-585-3880. Republicans, 202-585-3881. Independents, 202-585-3882. And if you're outside the U.S., it's 202-585-3883. Also want to note that our C-SPAN bus is kicking off its Big 12 conference tour at West Virginia University this morning. Over the next month, the bus will visit all 10 schools during its visits, and over the next 5 minutes, we'll have 10 students participating in the program with the congressman. They're joining us from the Mountain Lair, the student union on campus. So we'll get to them in a second. But first, we'll go to Joyce in Charleston, West Virginia, on our line for Democrats. Joyce, good morning.
Hi, Representative Rahall.
Good morning, Joyce.
I finished flushing at 11:30 last night. I just kept on until I got it all done because, boy, this has really been an ordeal. But the larger issue, I think, is, you know, for a long time, I mean, I belong to the League of Women Voters. We had a big study on water. We had someone from West Virginia University down to talk about it. It's West Virginia's greatest resource, and we seem to think, I mean, you know, too many people think that coal and oil, and gas is, and we are systematically destroying our state and our water supply, which is really, people know now, surely they should know, that it's the water that's our most important resource, and there is nothing wrong with regulations, nothing. And I just think that I've told Governor Tomlin that in person, you know, and Senator Manchin when he's governor, and I just wish that somehow we could protect our water supply and stop destroying one of the most beautiful states in the country.
Congressman.
Thank you, Joyce, for your call. First, let me commend you, John, and C-SPAN for this bus tour that you're undertaking, and commend all the students at West Virginia that are going to participate in today's call. And student involvement is great, and I'm glad to see that. Joyce, I can only imagine what you've been going through during this ordeal, and my heart goes out to you, and you should not have to be doing this. You know, the saying is that all accidents are preventable, and that's probably going to prove to be the case in this ordeal. And what has happened here highlights the fact that all of us, for ourselves, for our children, our grandchildren, we want and deserve to have clean water, clean air to breathe, clean environment in which to work, and to provide jobs for our people, and we can do both at the same time. In regard to clean water, you know, water is the most sacred, I believe, resource we have. Water is the source of everything we do in our daily lives. And unfortunately, too many are finding out now what it is to go without clean water. That's a tragedy. And we all, at the same time, want to provide jobs for our people. And that's kind of the conundrum we find ourselves in too many times in West Virginia. You say that our state is systematically being destroyed I assume, by our industries that provide jobs for our people. I'm not prepared to say that, but I am prepared to say that we can strike this balance of providing clean water and clean air for our people and providing jobs. For our people. Jobs are needed, and we know what the industries are in West Virginia that provide those jobs, coal being the number one, and we can never turn our back on that industry. But at the same time, we need to live and work together, and we can do that. Those who want to protect our environment, all of us want to protect our environment. All of us are environmentalists in that regard. But there is a balance we need to strike here, And every one of us have a stake. Every one of us are stakeholders in providing this balance for the future of our children and grandchildren.
Let's go out to Morgantown now at West Virginia University. Joining us via Skype is Colleen Beatty, a student there at the Student Union on campus. Colleen Beatty, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Hi.
Hi, Colleen.
Your question for the Congressman.
My question concerns the Affordable Care Act in West Virginia. West Virginia consistently ranks at the top among the 50 states in obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. So I'm wondering how you expect the West Virginia's adoption of the Affordable Care Act and the expansion of Medicaid to impact these trends in our state.
Well, I commend the governor and our state for taking the initiative to expand Medicaid as they have. That is crucial, and it's allowing a lot of people access to health care for the first time in their lives. It's my hope that under the Affordable Care Act, which I supported and I still support, although I do not call it the perfect law, and I do feel there is room for improvement, and we need to work together, throw out the political one-liners and throw out all the political games, and get together across party lines and fix this law. West Virginia, for the vast majority of our people, the Affordable Care Act will be a big boom. I mean, I'm telling you, it will work in the long term to the best interest of the vast majority of West Virginians. You look at the fact that no longer can a West Virginian be excluded from coverage because of a pre-existing condition. Children can stay on their parents' payroll to age 26. Free preventive health care is being provided for mental illness, for mammograms, for co-pays, or co-pays are not being required for a lot of visits for people for which you've described. That if we can treat them early on by getting them in for these free visits, then we don't have to treat them at a much more tremendous cost in the future to our system. So the Affordable Care Act is going to work in the long term. Are there problems now? You betcha there's problems. And I'm disgusted and called early on for heads to roll because of the disastrous rollout in the Affordable Care Act. And it was disastrous. And there perhaps were misstatements made along the way. And those who are responsible for providing this information to both the White House and those of us on Capitol Hill that support the law, their heads need to roll. And some of them, I think, have since I made that statement back in October, and perhaps more will before all is said and done. But certainly once we get through this troubled rollout period, and Social Security had its problems in the very beginning as well, so once we get through this, I'm very confident this law will work for the benefit of the majority of West Virginians, who most of all, remember, don't even go to the health exchanges to get their health care. Those health exchange problems are affecting a small minority of those that are trying to get affordable care.
Along with our students on the bus, several people calling in from West Virginia to talk to you. We're talking with Congressman Nick Rahall. He's the ranking member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and congressman from the 3rd District in West Virginia. Carl is calling in from Berkeley Springs on our line for Republicans. Carl, good morning.
I'm going to ask you two questions. What do you think about the Obama administration using the IRS to silence the Tea Party? And the next one is the Ethics Committee in Congress. Isn't that just for show? I mean, you were brought up before the Ethics Committee for a real estate transaction where you seemed to make a couple $1 million real quick. And I would like to know, what do you think about all this going on?
First, I think you ought to show the facts on your latter statement. That was a very gross misstatement, and I'll call it outright false. And if you can prove differently, please, please, please come to me with the facts. I know of no such transaction or no such investigation of myself by the Ethics Committee. So that, maybe you have me confused with somebody else, I don't know. In regard to the first question, the IRS versus the Tea Party, the IRS should not be overly scrutinizing or targeting any group for political reasons. whether it's the Tea Party or any of these conservative groups who have taken the Supreme Court decision in the United case and gone really haywire with it. But that doesn't, in my opinion, trigger an unwarranted special targeting by the IRS, because they're obeying the law. The Supreme Court has ruled they can do this. So the IRS should not be targeting any group for political purposes.
Back out to Morgantown, West Virginia, to West Virginia University. About 30,000 students enrolled at the university, and one of them is Samantha Runyon. Samantha Runyon, you're on with Congressman Rahal.
Hi.
Hi, Samantha.
To talk with us.
Your question.
Hi, my question is about the King Coal Highway. In March of 1999, the King Coal Highway Authority was established to promote and advance the development of a modern highway in the southern counties of West Virginia, which also happens to be the poorest area of the state. And almost 14 years later, this project is still incomplete. So particularly given the connection between infrastructure development and economic growth, I'm curious why this project hasn't been made a bigger priority and what you plan to do as the ranking member of the House Infrastructure and Transportation Committee from the Democratic Party to facilitate this completion.
Thank you for your question, Samantha. Very good question. And believe you me, the King Coal Highway is still a top priority. It's a top priority of mine and many who want to see that road become a reality as a way to open up southern West Virginia, to look beyond coal, which even our enemies in the EPA want us to do. And I have gone to the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Gina McCarty, shortly after she was appointed to her position. And I have pleaded with her in the White House to help us get the necessary permitting to allow this vital segment of the King Coal Highway in Mingo County to be completed. I've worked with the land developer, Katiga, with the coal company, Consol, with the economic developers in Mingo County. Steve Komenar just talked with them within the last week on this project. The private sector that is ready to step up to the plate and help us get this project done. And it's down to the crucial stages now within the EPA. And I am prepared to even go to the White House, to the President on this issue. You're right, I am the top Democrat on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. I've gotten a lot of money for this highway over my years in the Congress, whether Democrats were in control or whether Republicans were in control. I've worked across party aisles to secure funding for not only the King Coal Highway, but the Coalfield Expressway, the Shawnee Parkway, many other vital stretches of highway needed in southern West Virginia. Route 10, that most dangerous segment of road between Man and Logan, where school buses play chicken with coal trucks. I got the first $50 million. And then, God bless his memory, Senator Byrd would help and come along with additional monies. We did a 1-2 as a tango process we would do on these roads in southern West Virginia when we had the earmark process open to us. Unfortunately, we do not have earmarkings today. The Republicans in the Congress have made earmarks illegal. So therefore, it's much more difficult. And we know our overall budget climate as well. So it's much more difficult to procure additional earmarked dollars for these roads as I want to do. And I believe in earmarking when they're fully scrutinized and transparent to the public. But now, on the King Coal Highway, especially this vital segment in Mingo County, our main blockage is those familiar words in West Virginia that have come to stymie so much that we want to do, especially within the coal industry, called the EPA. And that's where our roadblock is right now, but I've not given up. I've not given up on the EPA. We're going to be working with them, and I believe you can ask any official down in Mingo County how hard I've been working on this.
We'll stay at West Virginia University. Brian Bumgardner now joins us via Skype. Brian, good morning.
Hey, good to be here.
Go ahead with your question.
Okay, Nick, earlier in the program you said you supported a balance between industry and environmental protection in our state. Yet last week you were one of only 5 Democrats to vote for the Reducing Excessive Deadlines Act, a bill that cuts the EPA's regulatory power on industries exactly like the one responsible for the chemical spill. Can you explain your voting decision to the constituents affected by this spill right now?
Yeah, Brian, that vote to which you refer affected Superfund sites. The situation we are facing now with this latest horrendous ordeal in West Virginia, the chemical spill, relates to Clean Water Act issues. Now, both of those do come under the jurisdiction, as well as FEMA and a lot of other oversight over this spill, do come within the jurisdiction of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, where I'm ranking Democrat. We will be following these investigations very closely. After first, of course, as I said in the beginning, we ensure the immediate health and safety of the people. That's our #1 concern. But the vote to which you refer, which is not going anywhere in another body, by the way, as I'm sure you're aware too, but nevertheless, it affected Superfund sites and not the clean water issues involved with this particular issue in southern West Virginia.
Let's go to our line for Democrats. Sam is calling in from Fairmont, West Virginia. Sam, good morning. You're on with Congressman Nick Rahall, Congressman of the 3rd District.
Hello, Nick, Joe. How are you?
All right, Sam. How you doing?
Oh, not too bad. I'm the one who called your office up here. I'm stuck here in Pittsburgh. We gave that stuff to Manchin's bunch over there. How come Natalie tweeted me 2 days before that, huh? And your staff, they can't do anything either. What are they going to do? Let them hang us down here, or whatever?
Sam, what's your question? I'm sorry.
My question is, why did she tweet me 2 days before that happened down there? And that's for painting on ships, not only for frock.
Do you know what Sam's talking about?
I'm afraid I don't.
Okay. We'll go to Danny in Ogden, Utah on our line for Independence. Danny, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for taking my call. First, I want to thank everyone at C-SPAN for the great job that you do. I just wanted to take a step back for one moment and get the gentleman to comment on the unemployment extension question and also the living wage question. I feel that it's I'm not quite sure the words to use, almost immoral for us to have a system in which someone can put 40 hours per week into our free market system and not get a living wage for that, no matter what their job is. That should be the bottom line. And so I was hoping you'd comment on that and perhaps the possibility of a multi-year plan to increase it. And maybe we don't want the business models to survive that can't support jobs that pay a living wage. And thank you very much.
I understand your second question on living wage, Danny. What was that first question again? I'm sorry I missed that.
He asked a question on unemployment.
Unemployment, sure.
benefits.
Okay, I got it. I got it right.
It was just so you know, it was a question we asked our viewers this morning of how long is too long to be on unemployment benefits.
Right. Well, let me say for us not to extend unemployment insurance to those Americans who are out of work through no fault of their own is unconscionable. We should have included that in the bipartisan budget agreement passed back in December. Unfortunately, it was not included therein. We have not addressed it yet in this session, the second session of the Congress. So I hope we can address that sooner rather than later. We need to extend those unemployment benefits. And again, I say it's because these people are out of work through no fault of their own and are seeking work. That's a requirement, that they seek a job in order to obtain unemployment benefits. As far as the time frame, John, it's hard for me to put a time frame on it because so many factors come into play. The strength of the economy, the ability to find a job, and just overall economic conditions. As far as the living wage, I totally agree with Danny and his assessment of those who are working that deserve a living wage. There are 21 states across the United States that have minimum wages higher than the current federally required minimum wage. The minimum wage increase would improve our economic conditions in this country. It would improve our deficit situation. It would allow people to get good paying jobs, which they then pay taxes. It goes back to reducing our deficit. It also means that these people that are working for these minimum wages are going to put that money back into the economy. They're not going to hoard it into some hedge fund or put it on Wall Street somewhere to bet with their wages. They're going to put it back into the economy, buying food and water and bread for their families, perhaps taking their families on a much-needed vacation. So that's money back into our domestic economy, and that's why I support a living wage and an increase in the minimum wage.
Back to West Virginia University. University founded in 1867. It's about 70 miles south of Pittsburgh in Morgantown. And out there waiting is Adam Cart. Adam Cart, you're on with Congressman Rahal.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm a senior biochemistry major from Fayette County, which lies within your district.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a question about the coal industry and the economy. It's kind of becoming increasingly more obvious that the economy of West Virginia won't be able to depend on the unsustainable coal industry as a driving force for much longer. So what's being done to prepare West Virginia for the future, and what do you envision eventually filling the void that the coal industry will one day leave behind?
Very good question. Very good question, Adam. And, you know, I spoke in defense of our coal industry earlier, and I speak in defense of it again. Coal has been, it is, and it always will be the mainstay of our economy in West Virginia. It provides good paying jobs. It literally keeps the lights on in many of our southern counties, where the revenue from coal production allows the hiring of law enforcement personnel. It allows keeping the lights on the streets in these counties. It literally puts the bread on the table for so many families. And that's why we need the coal industry. But to get straight to your question, we cannot put all of our eggs in the coal basket alone. I've said this for many years. We need diversification of our economy. We need to look at other industries too. We have oil and gas, for example. We have timbering. We have agriculture. We have technology. We have tourism. Tourism, the second largest generator of revenues to our state coffers. So these are other industries that we are promoting. We've made great strides. Look at the whitewater rafting industry in your home county, Fayette County. Look at the Hatfield-McCoy Trail system across many of the southern counties that are bringing in outside monies in tourist dollars to be spent in our state. The New River Gorge, Adam, in your home county, Fayette County, and the preservation of that vital natural resource of ours. That goes back to my first years in Congress when I passed legislation protecting the New River. And we built upon it in '88 and built the largest system of federally protected rivers east of the Mississippi, using the New River as a backbone. That was the anchor. Believe you me, that was a big draw card that brought the Boy Scouts of America to southern West Virginia. There were National Jamboree last summer. We saw what a tremendous boost for West Virginia that was. Every Boy Scout that I saw quoted in the press went back home talking about how great West Virginia is, how great the people are, number one, and how they can't wait to come back. And we have the Worldwide Jamboree coming in a few years. And now this is a permanent home of the Boy Scouts of America. So we have a lot going for us in southern West Virginia besides coal. And that's what we need to continue to build upon. And I'll continue to use my seniority in the Congress, which does count, and especially with the loss of Senators Byrd and Rockefeller now. We have, you know, I'm in the top 6 out of 435 in seniority in the Congress. That really means something for one's home state. That's why I chose to stay where I am in the House of Representatives as opposed to running for the Senate, because I cannot give up in good conscience that seniority, that ability to work across party aisles and to continue to diversify our economy in southern West Virginia. I could not give that up to go to be 100 out of 100 in the other body. So this is something that I cannot stress enough, that we do need diversification in our economy, and it takes seniority and clout in Congress to do that.
You talk about your defense of the coal industry. I want to ask you, there's several groups out there that have been hitting you on what they say is your support for a carbon tax. The American Energy Alliance released a new ad last week about this. I want to ask you about that, and it was in this progressive budget that you voted for last year.
Yeah, and if you read that progressive budget, the vote that was on the floor of the House, there is no mention of a carbon tax. What I voted for in that progressive budget was the revenues that would have been derived from incomes on the $250,000 and above income group in our country. The tax, the revenue that would have been derived from a tax on the upper income. That's why I voted for the progressive budget.
So these are
now,
taxes.
I'm not for any carbon tax, Make no mistake about it. I have voted against carbon taxes in the past. I've introduced a legislation saying no carbon tax. So, you know, out of 22,000 some votes I've cast in the Congress, John, it's easy to find something that maybe can be interpreted to be in a bill in the after-the-fact documents that come out, such as happened on this progressive budget vote. But I am not for a carbon tax, and make no mistake about it.
Congressman Rahal is in his 18th term. He represents the 3rd District of West Virginia. We're going to go back out to Morgantown. Waiting there is Afshin Masaji. You're on with Congressman Rahal.
Hi, I'm Afshin Masagi. I'm from Charleston, West Virginia. I'm a sophomore chemistry and theater major. And my question deals with the Affordable Care Act. 43% of West Virginians signed up for the Affordable Care Act. 43% of the goals for the period signed up for the Affordable Care Act, with only 17% of those being between the ages of 18 and 35. What can be done to convince our fellow West Virginians to utilize the resources made available by the Affordable Care Act, especially in the age of 18 to 35?
Very good question, because the segment that you referenced is going to be crucial to the full success of the Affordable Care Act. And unfortunately, too many young people that perhaps are in good health today, God bless them for being in good health, but they're taking a gamble by not signing up for the Affordable Care Act. Because when one's good health is taken away, God forbid the repercussions, and especially if there's no insurance in place. It could wipe out one's life savings. So it's crucial that the young people recognize the long-term positive effects of the Affordable Care Act, and that they do sign up in larger numbers than what they have thus far by the numbers you referenced. And this is going to help lower the premiums for everybody that signs up for the Affordable Care Act, and that was the goal of it. Now, granted, premiums are rising right now, but they would not be rising as fast or as high if it were not for the Affordable Care Act and the prospect of competition, which is another positive aspect of the Affordable Care Act. Competition usually means lower prices, and that's the goal we have to get to, and the young people have to recognize that and participate in this goal.
Let's go to Auburn, Pennsylvania. Diane is waiting on our line for Republicans. Diane, good morning.
Good morning. I am looking to see, I belong to a group that is with the Oath Keepers. I am speaking for myself, not on behalf of them. With the chemical spill that was in West Virginia, I saw that on the morning news, and what we do as a group with Oath Keepers is try to help other people out and towns, etc., so they have these things in place in the event of a crisis, as you just went through down there. Unfortunately, we did not have enough people on board in West Virginia to step up at that time. I was on the phone with your emergency management a few times there, along with one other individual that does live within your state also, offering to bring down tankers of water, etc., of whatever your needs were within the state. I wanted to say that I commend you for standing up for the coal industry within West Virginia, because I do know that that is coming down. The government is coming down hard on that industry. They want to see that gone. I do commend you for standing on that and keeping the jobs in place for that. I am a bit concerned, though, with the chemical spill into the waterways and where that is headed. There's been no talk as far as whether or not this is even cleanable. I know that it's being diluted and some of the methane is being evaporated into the air, but where does that leave us environmentally when this is traveling through the other states now?
Congressman.
Well, very good questions, because those are questions I have as well, and that we need to have answered during
Senator
this,
from Virginia.
Mr. President, are we in a quorum call?
We are.
Mr. President, I ask that the proceedings of the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, today I rise to discuss my growing concern about the effects of our actions, or in this case, inaction, in Washington on our military families and veterans in Virginia. As we all know, the Senate and House passed the Bipartisan Budget Act last month, which hopefully will be a first step towards getting us back on the right track towards a functioning Congress. But in that legislation, and I know many of my colleagues, were disappointed that it included a reduction in military pension cost of living adjustments for retired and medically retired service members. Our servicemen and women deserve much better than seeing their pensions arbitrarily cut by lawmakers in Washington. What was particularly disappointing was that this action singled out our military families and veterans disproportionately. Now, yesterday evening, the Appropriations Committees released their 2014 budget. I was pleased that this omnibus budget proposal repeals the COLA cuts for a portion of those military families, for those disabled military retirees who are medically retired, and for survivors of military retirees who elected to pay survivor benefit annuities to take care of their families after their deaths. This is progress, and I hope we can finish the job, though, and pass an amendment that I've been working on with Senator Shaheen and Senator Kaine. There are a series of other proposals to make sure that we fully roll back this unfair cut to our military families and veterans. We know over the last 2 decades, our military has fought 2 wars. Their families have made unprecedented sacrifices. Unfortunately, this sacrifice was again brought home last week when a Navy MH-53 Echo helicopter crashed off the coast of Virginia Beach. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families of the missing and fallen. Lieutenant Sean Christopher Snyder, Lieutenant Wesley Vian Dorn, and Navy Aircrewman Brian Andrew Collins. Virginia is home to one of the nation's largest concentration of active duty and retired military personnel. I consider it an honor and privilege to represent them here in Congress. So while we're shutting down government and signing short-term CRs, our servicemen's and women's pensions are being unfairly singled out. This isn't right, this isn't fair, and my hope is that today or in the next few days we will fully correct the mistake we made in the Budget Act last month. In my time here in the Senate, working for our military family and their veterans has been one of my top priorities, and I'm proud that I've worked across the aisle on this issue relentlessly. I'd like to point out one particular action where we've made dramatic progress. I've worked with the Puller Clinic at William & Mary Law School in Hampton Roads to develop a model for veterans legal clinics to help some of the nation's backlog on veterans benefits claims. To my mind, it's an embarrassment that our veterans sometimes have to wait for over a year to get their claims processed to receive the benefits they've already earned. Working with the William & Mary Puller Law Clinic, we got the VA to accept this model and to be certified by the VA to become the first law school in the country to be able to complete fully developed claims. Now, 19 universities in Virginia are committed to serving veterans, and more than 15 law schools across the country have adopted the William & Mary model. The incredible thing about this project, and we often use the term win-win-win, well, this truly is a win-win-win. It's a win for the taxpayers because there are no taxpayer funds involved. It's a win for our veterans who are able to get their claims processed in a more rapid and expeditious manner. And it's a win for the law students who gain valuable experience in both dealing with a large federal agency, the VA, but more importantly, by having that ability to help one-on-one veterans who deserve to get their benefits. I've also worked with my friend and former Virginia colleague, Jim Webb, to draft legislation for a complete comprehensive look at military compensation and retirement. This commission, where we've worked with Chairman Levin as well, will be reporting later this year. I look forward to the results of that because we do have to recognize our overall compensation and benefits packages need an overall review. I believe that this commission will make strong recommendations on how we can both modernize and achieve fiscal stability for our military. I'm proud of the work I've done on veterans in terms of the Puller Clinic, in terms of the overall looking at the military compensation package as part of an effort to make sure that we honor our commitment to our military. But as we honor that commitment to our military, we have to recognize as well that the threats to our nation are not just those posed by outside forces, but continue to be a threat of our increasing debt and deficit. I often like to cite former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mullen, who said the single largest threat to our nation was not the threat of terrorists, but the threat of that $17 trillion debt and deficit, which goes up by over $4 billion a night. A debt burden that may weigh down our ability to compete in the future. Now, I continue to come to the floor, not always successfully, to urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle that we cannot continue to punt on this issue, that ultimately both political parties are going to have to give. We're going to have to find ways to generate additional revenues through a comprehensive reform of our tax code. We're going to have to find a way to make sure that the promise of military pensions and benefits, but also the promise of Social Security and Medicare will be here for future generations. That will mean both political parties will have to be willing to give on their sacred cows. We've got to make sure as well, if we put together this comprehensive approach on debt and deficit, it will provide the kind of financial stability to our military families to make sure that those pensions, benefits, and kind of compensation packages will be there for themselves and for future people who serve. But that's for a future battle. Right now, we've got to finish the work that the Appropriations Committee started on getting rid of this unfair attack on the military COLAs that was included in the Budget Act. So I hope my colleagues will join my friend Senator Kaine and Senator Shaheen and others that would replace the cuts to the military COLAs. The approach that we've taken would do this by closing a tax loophole that allows some corporations to actually avoid paying their fair share of taxes. There may be other alternatives as well. I'll look at any that make sure that they are fair and reasonable and make sure that our military families don't get singled out. Virginians have served with honor in our military for generations, and I want to assure our servicemen and women that there is ample time to undo these changes before they take effect. I would remind those who are listening that this decrease in the COLA doesn't actually take place until the next year, so we still have time to rectify this. I promise to continue using every tool I can to fight these unfair pension cuts and to make sure that our military families, the promise we've made to our military families and these retirees gets honored. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a, Before I note the absence of a quorum, Mr. President, I have 5 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Well, Senate work continues today on a bill extending emergency unemployment benefits that expired back in December. We are expecting lawmakers to break for the usual caucus meetings today from 12:30 to 2:15 Eastern. And then shortly after they return at 2:30, the Senate has scheduled a series of votes. It includes a Democratic amendment that would extend unemployment benefits through November of this year. A group of Republican senators have offered a similar proposal, but it currently only extends benefits for 3 months rather than the 11 months that Democrats are seeking. The House is in today. Members have just gavelled in. They gavelled in at noon. We're expecting debate on a continuing resolution to keep the government funded past January 15th, thereby avoiding another government shutdown. You can see the House on our companion network, C-SPAN.
Madam President.
Senator from South Dakota.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, I come to the floor today to talk about the damage Obamacare is doing to the struggling economy. Now, after months of unrelenting coverage